Hi friends, I am Uday Kandpal and I welcome you all to yet another lecture on NCERT Class 8 History Chapter 10 with Fact Elaboration. So the name of the chapter is The Changing World of Visual Arts. So let's start. So new forms of imperial art. From the 18th century of a stream of European artists came to India along with the British traders and rulers. The artists brought with them new styles and new conventions of painting. They began producing the pictures which became widely popular in Europe and helped shape Western perceptions of India. European artists brought with them the idea of realism. This was a belief that the artist had to observe carefully and depict faithfully what the eyes saw. What the artist produced was expected to look real and lifelike. European artists also brought with them the technique of oil painting, a technique with which the Indian artists were not very familiar. Oil painting enabled the artists to produce images that looked real. Not all the European artists in India were inspired by the same things. The subject they painted were varied, but invariably they seemed to be emphasizing superiority of Britain, its culture, its people, its power. Let's look at a few major trends within imperial art. One popular imperial tradition was that of the picturesque landscape. The style of painting depicted India as a quaint land to be explored by traveling British artists. Its landscape was rugged and wild, seemingly untamed by the human hands. Thomas Daniel and his nephew William Daniel were the most famous of artists who painted within hands waited within tradition. They came to India in 1785 and stayed for 7 years, journeying from Calcutta to northern and southern India. They produced some of the most evocative, picturesque landscape of the Britain newly conquered territories in India. They produced some of the most evocative, picturesque landscapes of the Britain's newly conquered territories in India. Their largely oil paintings on the canvas were regularly exhibited to select the audiences in Britain, and their albums of engravings were eagerly brought up by the British public keen to know about the Britain's empire. So let's talk about the portraits of the authority. Another tradition of the art that became immensely popular in the colonial India was portrait painting. The rich and the powerful, both British and Indian, wanted to see themselves on canvas. Unlike the existing Indian tradition of painting portraits in miniature, colonial portraits were life-size images that looked lifelike and real. The size of the paintings itself projected the importance of the patrons who commissioned these portraits. This new style of picture portraiture also served as an ideal means of displaying the lavish lifestyles, wealth, and status that the empire generated. As portrait painting became popular, many European portrait painters came to India in search of profitable commissions. One of the most famous of the visiting European painter was Johann Zoffany. He was born in Germany, migrated to England, and came to India in the mid 1780s for 5 years. Many of the Indian Nawabs to begin commissioning imposing oil portraits by European painters. You have seen how the British posted residents in the Indian courts and began controlling the affairs of the state, undermining the power of the king. Some of these Nawabs reacted against this interference, others accepted the political and the cultural superiority of the British. They hoped to socialize within the British and adopt their styles and tastes. Muhammad Ali Khan was one such Nawab. After a war with the British in the 1770s, he became a dependent pensioner of the East India Company, but he nonetheless commissioned two visiting European artists, Till Catley and George Wilson, to paint his portrait and gifted these paintings to the King of England and the directors of the East India Company. Painting history. There was a third category of imperial art called the history painting. This tradition sought to dramatize and recreate the various episodes of British imperial history and enjoyed great prestige and popularity during the late 18th century and the early 19th century. There was a third category of imperial art called the history painting. This tradition sought to be dramatizing and recreating the various episodes of British imperial history and enjoyed great prestige and popularity during the late 18th and the early 19th century. The celebration of British military triumph can be seen in the many paintings of the Battle of the Seringapatam, now Srirangapatnam. Tipu Sultan of Mysore, as you know, was one of the most powerful enemies of the British. He was finally defeated in 1799 at the famous Battle of Srirangapattam. The British troops are shown storming the fort from all sides, cutting Tipu's soldiers to pieces, climbing the walls, raising the British flag aloft on the ramparts of the Tipu's fort. It is a painting full of action and energy. The painting dramatizes the event and glorifies the British triumph. We can see different trends in the different colors in Mysore. Tipu Sultan not only fought the British on the battlefield but also registered the cultural traditions associated with them. He continued to encourage local traditions and had the walls of the palace at the Srirangapatnam covered with mural paintings done by local artists. This painting celebrates the famous Battle of Polilur in 1780, in which Tipu and Hyder Ali defeated the English troops. In the court of Murshidabad, we see a different trend. Here, after defeating Sirajuddaula, the British had successfully installed a puppet Nawabs on the throne, first Mir Zafar and then Mir Qasim. This is a picture of a boat procession painted by a court painter in the late 18th century. Notice how the local miniature artists at Murshidabad began adopting the elements of the European realism. They use perspective, which creates a sense of distance between the objects and are near to those at distance. They use lights and shades to make the figures look lifelike and real. This is a picture of procession painted. So we are talking about a picture in the book. This is a picture of a procession painted by a court painter in the late 18th century. So we need not study about that right now. It's not as important. At the same time, British officials who found the world in the colonies different from that back home wanted images through which they could understand India, remember their life in India, and depict India into the Western world. So we find the local painters producing a vast number of images of local paints, plants and animals, historical buildings and monuments, festivals and processions, trades and crafts, castes and communities. These pictures, eagerly collected by the East India Company officials, came to be known as company paintings. The new popular Indian art. In Bengal, around the pilgrimage and center for the temple of Kalighat, local villages called painters called the Patuas and the potters called the Kumars in the eastern India and the Kumhars in north India began developing a new style of art. They moved from the surrounding villages into the Calcutta in the early 19th century. This was a time when the city was expanding as a commercial and administrative center. Colonial offices were coming up, new buildings and roads were being built, markets were being established. The city appeared as a place of opportunity where people could come to make a new living. Village artists who came and settled in the city in the hope of a new patron and new buyers of their art. Before the 19th century, the village Patuas and the Kumors had worked on the mythological themes and produced images of the gods and goddesses. On shifting to Kalighat, they continued to paint these religious images. Traditionally, the figures in the skull paintings look flat, not rounded. Now, Kalighat painters begin to use shading to give them rounded form to make the images look three-dimensional. Yet the images were not realistic and lifelike. In fact, what is special to be noted in these early Kalighat paintings is the use of the bold, deliberately non-realistic style where the figures emerged large and powerful with a minimum lines, detail and colors. Many of these Kalighat pictures are printed in the large numbers and sold in the market. Initially, the images were engraved in the wooden blocks. The carved blocks were inked, pressed and against paper, and then the woodcut prints would they produced colored by hand. In this way, many copies could be produced from the same block. By the late 19th century, the mechanical printing presses was set up in the different parts of India, which allowed prints to be produced in the even larger numbers. These prints could therefore be sold cheap in the market. Even the poorer could buy them. Popular prints were not painted only by the poor village at Kalighat Patuas. Often the middle-class Indian artists set up the printing presses and produced the prints for the wide market. They were trained in British art schools in the new methods of the life study, oil painting and printmaking. One of the most successful of these presses that were set up in the late 19th century Calcutta was the Calcutta Art Studio. It produced lifelike images of the eminent Bengali personalities as well as mythological pictures. But these mythological pictures were realistic. The figures were located in picturesque landscape settings with the mountains, lakes, rivers, and forests. These types of popular pictures were printed and circulated in the other parts of the India, which separated with the spread of nationalism. Popular prints of the early 20th century began carrying the nationalist messages. In many of them, you see the Bharat Mata appearing as a goddess carrying the national flag or the nationalist heroes sacrificing their head to the Mata and gods and the goddess slaughtering the British. So we'll now talk about Raja Ravi Verma. Raja Ravi Verma, 29 April 1848 to October 1906, was a celebrated Indian painter and artist. He is considered among the greatest painters in the history of Indian art. His works are one of the best examples of the fusion of European academic art with purely Indian sensibility and iconography. Additionally, he was notable for making an affordable lithographs of the paintings available to the public, which greatly enhanced his reach and influence as a painter and public figure. His lithographs increased the involvement of common people with the fine arts and defined artistic taste among the common people. Furthermore, his religious depictions of Hindu deities and works from the Indian epic poetry and Puranas received profound acclaim. Verma was patronized by Ililam Tirunal, the next Maharaja of Travancore, and began formal training thereafter. He learned the basics of painting in Madurai. Later, he was trained in the water painting by Ramaswamy Naidu and in the oil painting by Dutch portrait Theodore Janson. The British administrator Edgar Thurston was significant in promoting the careers of Varma and brother. Verma received widespread acclaim for what he won an award of exhibition of his paintings of Vienna in 1873. Verma's paintings were also sent to the World's Columbian Exposition held in Chicago, and he was awarded 3 gold medals. He traveled throughout India in search of subjects. He often modeled Hindu goddesses on the Indian women, whom he considered beautiful. Ravi Verma is particularly noted for his paintings depicting episodes from the story of Dushyant and Shakuntala and the Nal and Damayanti from the Mahabharata. Ravi Verma's representation of mythological characters has become a part of Indian imagination of the epics. He is often criticized for being too showy of sentimental of his style, but his work remains very popular in India. Many of his fabulous paintings have aroused housed at Lakshmi Vilas Palace, Vadodara. Raja Ravi Verma artworks, Mohini playing with a ball, Yashoda and Krishna, Village Ballet, Lady Lost in Thought, Damayanti talking to a swan, the orchestra, Arjuna and Subhadra, the heartbroken Subhat player, Shakuntala, Lord Krishna as ambassador, Jatayu, a bird devotee of Lord Ram is mauled by Ravan, Victory of Indrajit, the gypsies, the lady playing sword pet, lady giving alms at the temple, Lord Ram conquers Varun, Ghee Varghese Mar, Vigorous of Parumala, Nair woman, romancing couple Draupadi ready to meet Kichak, Shantanu and Matsya Gandha, Shakuntala composing a love letter to the king Dushyanta, girl in the sage Kanva's hermitage, Bharani Thirunal, Lakshmi Bai of Travancore, Sri Shanmukh Subramanya Swami, woman holding a fan, 3D painting of Mysore king on a horse available at Mysore Palace. Thank you for watching my lecture. Hope you learned a lot for the competitive exam. Have a nice day. Bye bye.